BRICS leaders will have a virtual meeting on the current situation in Gaza. President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to chair the extraordinary session. The situation in Gaza continues to worsen as the Israeli military intensifies their operations in the besieged strip. Meanwhile, Israel has decided to recall its ambassador in South Africa for consultations. SABC News reporter Khayelihle Khumalo has more.
Quite a very important BRICS meeting will happen, and a very extraordinary session, a virtual one it's that by BRICS leaders. South Africa, as the chairperson under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to convene that particular session to look at the current situation in Gaza. We do know that the BRICS states have just been so vocal about the current situation in Gaza, but we do understand that India is going to be represented by their Foreign Affairs Minister and not Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But also, most importantly, the United Nations Secretary General as well, Antonio Guterres, is going to deliver a statement. But also something that is key in this regard is that as soon as that meeting is done, the leaders are expected to have a joint statement. But also something that is quite important is that new BRICS members, the likes of Argentina, Saudi Arabia, UAE and other countries will have an opportunity as well to shine a spotlight on the current situation in Gaza. And something that is very important as well during the course of the day in Parliament in Cape Town, we do understand that now that particular all-important decision regarding whether South Africa should cut off ties with the state of Israel is really going to dominate proceedings in Parliament, as we know that EFF brought that particular motion calling on South Africa to completely cut off diplomatic ties with Israel. But then you do have other opposition parties who are totally against the move, who are saying that South Africa will be deprived of an opportunity to play a very prominent role as a peacemaker in the Middle East. So the situation is still untenable in Gaza, as we know that the healthcare facilities came under siege, the schools, but also, to use the words that were really just used in this regard by the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, she said, we've seen also quite a high number of UN staffers killed in this conflict. And also we do understand there's an issue around the proposed truce. The state of Qatar has been very instrumental behind the scenes, negotiating with also the very key players in this conflict.
All right, let's get more on this story. I'm joined in studio by SABC News' international news editor, Sophie Mokoena. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Just take us through the importance of that BRICS meeting.
This meeting is quite important. As Kaya has pointed out, you also have other countries that are going to join. These are countries that were announced during the meeting in Johannesburg that they are going to join BRICS, and that those countries include, among others, Iran. And we know what is Iran's position in relation to this conflict, a hardline. You also have Saudi Arabia. You know, they've been trying to manage this situation because of the relations with the United States of America. And at the time where they had announced earlier on that they are trying to strengthen their relations with Israel, you also have the United Arab Emirates, and you know very well that they are part of this Middle East, the Gulf region, and the group that support the Middle East process of two-state solution. And therefore it is important. I think all along, South Africa has been very vocal and very strong in terms of its position in the country and outside the country in relation to support of the Palestinian quest for freedom. And now some were not even listening because the view was that this is a small country on the African continent. Now South Africa is going to partner or is going to discuss this issue or sell its views to this bigger forum, a very important forum, because you have countries such as China, Russia, Brazil, India, And therefore, it becomes a huge story. That is why I am not surprised that the Israeli authority took a decision to recall its ambassador, because they realized that South Africa is serious. And also after sending that referral to the International Criminal Court, one person who is going to address this important meeting is the UN Secretary General. And therefore, it speaks to the weight of this meeting this afternoon. Perhaps let's take a listen at what the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said about this issue of the Middle East, but looking ahead, and something I suspect he is going to talk about, even though he's going to emphasize the truth and also emphasize the release of hostages. Let's take a listen.
To have an after, we must have a before. And the before obviously conditions the after. And that is why I've been insisting on the need for a humanitarian ceasefire, on unrestricted access for humanitarian aid, on the liberation of hostages, and on the need to end the violations of international humanitarian law and the protection of civilians. But having said so, I think it's also important to be able to transform this tragedy into an opportunity. And for that to be possible, it is essential that after the war, we move in a determined and irreversible way to a two-state solution. Now, that means, of course, that after the war, and this is my opinion, I believe it would be important to have a strengthened Palestinian Authority assuming responsibilities in Gaza. I understand that the Palestinian Authority cannot come with the Israeli tanks in Gaza, which means that the international community needs to look into a transition period. I do not think that a UN protectorate in Gaza is a solution. I think we will need a multi-stakeholder approach in which different countries, different entities will cooperate. For Israel, of course, the US is the main guarantor of its security. For Palestinians, the neighboring and Arab countries of the region are essential. So everybody needs to come together to create the conditions for a transition, allowing for the Palestinian Authority, a strengthened Palestinian Authority, to assume responsibilities in Gaza. And then, based on that, to finally move, as I said, in a determined and irreversible way to a two-state solution based on the principles that have been largely established by the international community and which I have time and time again outlined.
Well, clearly, there the Secretary General talking about a way forward, and the emphasis is on the two-state solution. But also you have to guarantee security to Palestine and also to Israel. Israel, we know, they know very well America is on their side and some Western countries. And therefore, in relation to Palestine, you have groups such as BRICS that are able perhaps to look at a possibility of supporting Palestine so that you really implement this two-state solution. But both sides at this moment are saying the two-state solution is not a possibility.
Sophie Mokoena, SABC News International Editor, thanks so much for your time and insight this afternoon.